Have you ever noticed how a belief can just sneak into your mind? Not because you saw hard evidence, but just because you've heard it over and over again? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most subtle, yet incredibly powerful forms of psychological influence out there. We're not talking about some grand, complex argument. Nope. We're talking about the simple, relentless brute force of repetition. This is how a false belief is built. And honestly, understanding this is one of the most critical skills you can have in the world today. It just doesn't feel right, does it? I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as rational people who weigh the evidence. But this simple trick, it reveals a fundamental vulnerability in how our minds are wired. It's like a backdoor, a cognitive exploit that lets beliefs get installed without us ever consciously clicking accept. And it works because our brains were built for a much simpler world, a world where familiar things were usually safe things. The problem is, in today's crazy, information-overloaded environment, that very same instinct can be weaponized against us. Okay, so to really get how this works, we need to look at two things: the tool itself and what the person using it is really trying to do. And believe me, this isn't just about getting you to believe one little fib. The real goal is way, way bigger. It's about building an entire belief system, a lens that changes how you see everything. The source material calls this a doctrine. And that's the key to the whole thing. So at its heart, repetition persuasion isn't really an argument, it's more of a compliance technique. It's not trying to win a debate with you using facts and logic, not at all. It's designed to make a statement feel true, simply by making it incredibly familiar. Think of your brain like a computer. It's always looking for shortcuts to run more efficiently. Well, this technique hacks that system using sheer frequency. For instance, if you hear product Z is the most reliable over and over again from all different places, your brain eventually stops treating it like a claim to be investigated and starts filing it away as a known fact. It's less like a debate and more like mental conditioning. And the engine that powers this whole thing is a cognitive bias that's been studied to death, called the illusion of truth effect. This is the specific glitch in our programming. See, our brains are wired to connect familiar with correct. Think about it. The first time you hear a really complex idea, it's a heavy lift for your brain. It takes a lot of energy to process. But the second, third, 10th time you hear it, the pathway is already there. It's easy, it's fluent. And here's the critical mistake. Our brain misinterprets that ease of processing as a sign that the information itself is true. It mistakes fluency for fact. And this is where it gets really serious. This brings us to the manipulator's endgame. The point isn't just one lie. It's to install a doctrine, a whole set of core beliefs that becomes the filter for your reality. Once that doctrine is in place, let's say it's something like, our nation is infallible, or that group of people is the enemy. It acts like this powerful anchor in your mind. From that point on, new information isn't judged on its own merits. It's judged by how well it fits the doctrine. If it fits, great, it's accepted. If it doesn't, it's automatically rejected as fake or hostile. This is exactly why it's a cornerstone of large-scale manipulation, from political propaganda to cults. It doesn't just change an opinion, it builds a whole new, self-reinforcing reality. So how does a lie actually get installed like this? It's not like a switch flips. It's a systematic, three-stage process. You can think of it like a ladder that a lie climbs to become truth. And understanding these steps is the absolute key to spotting it and stopping it. Okay, so this three-step ladder you see here is the whole playbook. First, you've got step 1, processing fluency. This is all about familiarity. The manipulator hammers you with a simple, catchy message. The economy is failing. Candidate X is strong, over and over. Each time you hear it, it gets a little easier for your brain to process. It starts to feel comfortable, familiar. That's the setup. Then comes the most important part, step 2, cognitive misattribution. This is the sleight of hand, the real trick. Your brain takes that easy, familiar feeling from step 1 and mistakes it for a sign of truth. The subconscious logic is something like, hey, I've heard this a lot, it feels easy to think about, so it's probably true. Finally, after that happens enough times, you hit step 3, acceptance. At this point, fighting the idea actually causes mental stress. It's called cognitive dissonance. So to get rid of that stress, your brain takes the path of least resistance. It just accepts the doctrine. Complying becomes easier than fighting. This right here, this is the whole magic trick. And it's so important to get this. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is not about being smart or dumb. It's a design feature of our brains being exploited. Your brain isn't consciously choosing to believe a lie. It's just running an automatic energy-saving program in the background that equates easy to process with likely to be true. And manipulators, they understand this cognitive shortcut way better than most of us do. They design their messages to be incredibly simple and memorable for this exact reason. So all of this leads to a pretty fascinating and honestly kind of disturbing question. Why? Why are our own minds so open to this? You'd think evolution would have patched a security flaw this big by now. Well, the answer is that it's not really a flaw. It's more like a conflict of interest between our brain's ancient programming and a manipulator's modern goals. It really is a paradox, isn't it? The same brain that can figure out quantum physics can be tricked by something this simple. But it's not because our brains are broken, it's because their number one job for millions of years hasn't been to find absolute capital T truth. It's been survival. And survival, biologically speaking, is all about saving energy. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ you have. It's an energy hog. So to cope, it evolved to rely on mental shortcuts to make quick, good enough decisions. The illusion of truth is just one of those shortcuts backfiring in a world it was never designed for. This chart lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the manipulator. Their goal is simple, low-effort indoctrination. They want to plant a belief with as little work, as few messy facts as possible. And on the other side, you've got your brain. Its goal is cognitive efficiency. It is always looking for ways to save energy, to automate things, to take the easy road. So the manipulator's desire for an easy way in perfectly matches the brain's desire for an easy way out. The key just fits the lock. And when it comes right down to it, it's about cognitive load. It is just plain hard work to constantly question a claim you hear all the time, especially if it's coming from people you trust. It creates mental friction, it's stressful. After a while, your brain, which is just trying to conserve its resources, sees a simpler path. Accepting the familiar idea makes the conflict go away. It's a release of tension. So in a way, compliance is just a form of mental exhaustion. It's your brain surrendering to get some peace and quiet. Okay, so we've taken the whole mechanism apart, we've looked at the psychology behind it. Now let's shift from diagnosis to defense, because it's not enough to just know how the trick works. You need a conscious, deliberate strategy to protect yourself. So how do you build that mental firewall? How do you turn this awareness into actual action? Here they are, your 3 essential countermeasures. First, you have to get good at consciously identifying the doctrine. This is an active thing. When you hear a simple claim repeated over and over without any real evidence, you have to mentally flag it. Say to yourself, okay, this is an attempt to create fluency. Just naming it helps break the spell. Second, you have to actively interrupt processing fluency. You can't just let the message wash over you. You gotta throw some sand in the gears. We'll get to how in just a second. And third, you have to enforce a source check boundary. This has to become a non-negotiable rule for yourself. You evaluate information based on where it came from and the quality of its evidence, not how many times you've heard it. So how do you actually interrupt that dangerous fluency? This is where you go on offense. You can't just passively receive the claim, you have to wrestle with it. So if the soundbite you keep hearing is, program X is a total success, don't let that slide. Actively rephrase it in your head as a complex question. Okay, by what specific numbers is program X considered a success? Where can I see the original unbiased data? And what are the known criticisms or failures? Just doing that simple act of rephrasing, forces your brain out of its lazy, passive mode and into an active, analytical one. It shatters the illusion. Actively looking for the other side of the story, or even just asking that powerful question, who benefits if I believe this without checking? It all accomplishes the same vital goal. You are deliberately making it harder for your brain to protect your own mind. All right, so we've covered the what, the how, and the why of repetition persuasion, and we've laid out the tools for your mental toolkit. As we wrap this up, let's distill it all down to the single most important lesson here. Let's bring this all home. Repetition persuasion is so powerful because it exploits something called the Doctrine Effect, making a lie feel true by dressing it up in the comfortable disguise of familiarity. The whole pattern is now crystal clear. It starts by creating processing fluency, making the message feel easy and effortless. This leads directly to that critical error, cognitive misattribution, where your brain mistakes that ease for truth. And from there, your brain, always looking to save energy and avoid stress, defaults to acceptance. It's the path of least resistance. And this really exposes the fundamental challenge we all face. Verifying the truth is work. It's an uphill battle. It demands critical thinking, checking sources, and being okay with complexity. A lie, on the other hand, doesn't have to do any of that. It just needs to be repeated. Resisting this takes a real, conscious commitment to doing the hard work. But here's the most powerful part. Just being aware of this breaks the loop. By learning to actively identify the doctrine and by enforcing a strict source check boundary for yourself, you're literally rewiring your brain's priorities. You're choosing factual rigor over the cheap comfort of familiarity. You're taking back control. Which brings us to a final question for you. Think about the messages you hear every single day, the things that just feel true because they're everywhere. Which one of those familiar truths will you decide to question today?